Thanks. I really appreciate the chance to be with you this afternoon. Thanks for taking the time to come out. Public service is a high calling, and your presence here today is a testament to your commitment to your community, your nation, and your fellow Americans. One of the core values of this school is the belief that integrity, compassion, and commitment to justice are among the qualities essential to those who lead. You believe in those ideals, and so do I. Americans deserve a government of integrity, compassion, and justice. But too often, that's far from the reality that we face today. When public tragedy results in an immediate and predictable reaction based on false assumptions, while evil continues to be allowed to prey on the innocent, as officials ignore the law and refuse to protect the people who elect them, government has not just failed Americans, it's endangered them. History proves it. You look at Columbine, Virginia Tech, Fort Hood, Jonesboro. All of those are examples of government fraud and failure that puts innocent people at risk. In each of those tragedies, the mass killers all had exactly the same advantage: gun-free zones and anti-self-defense laws that protected the safety of no one except the killers and condemned the victims to death without so much as a prayer. Let me say that again. Our policies gave more protection to the killers than to the innocent. In Tucson, the attention of the nation again was captured by the unspeakable acts of a madman, as the national media wasted no time in making a celebrity out of the deranged monster. They put his photograph everywhere, despite the fact that every criminal profiler, every FBI profiler in the world tells the media that airing the photographs of mass murderers is the last thing the media should do. They all say it turns the madman into a hero for every potential deranged copycat out there. It's sick, it's wrong, and the media really ought to be ashamed of themselves when they do it. Predictably, the political opportunists all rush to advance their political agendas. You know what I'm talking about. Here's a clip of some of what we saw on television.
On the eve of President Obama's State of the Union address, he is facing mounting pressure to grab on to one of this nation's political third rails in tomorrow's speech: gun control. In those first days after the Tucson massacre, the calls for reform started right here on this network.
We need common sense gun laws that say enough is enough.
Some advocates for gun control are looking at the tragedy as an opportunity to push for new laws.
The Congress, I think the nation's spirits would be lifted if the Congress acted quickly with the president and reinstated the assault weapons ban.
Congress needs to immediately reinstate that ban.
If the president follows Republican and Democratic tradition tomorrow night and says not a word about gun and ammunition control, then I, for one, will become disappointed in him for the first time.
I want to be clear. That was a horrible tragedy, and my heart and your heart goes out to all the victims and their loved ones. But we really need to have a frank talk about this. Those involved in that tragedy and the forgotten victims of past crimes deserve nothing less than a serious, honest conversation about what we face in America today. It's a discussion I believe you're not going to hear on MSNBC, and you're not going to hear it from the New York Times, because they won't admit the truth. The media and the political elites want us to believe that if we just pass another law or two, we can stop a madman in this country who's bent on violence. That is dishonest. If we could legislate evil out of people's hearts, we would have done it long ago. And when they tell you that a government ban on certain firearms or magazines is somehow going to make you safer, don't buy it, not for a minute. Because it's a lie, just like the lies they've told before. Tucson proves it. A few years ago, they told us that government's so-called gun-free zones would keep us safe from the violence of bad people. But the Tucson parking lot was within 1,000 feet of a school right across the street. Their madman ignored that gun-free zone all the way to his crime. The laws don't work, their lies don't ring true, and if Tucson tells us anything at all, it tells us this: government is failing. Government has failed with our money, our financial institutions. It's failed in running our post offices and trains. It's failed in enforcing our immigration laws, our drug laws, and our laws on the books against violent criminals with guns. They can't even pass a budget. When it comes to protecting us from the mayhem of a violent madman, government is an abject failure. Even worse, by its lies and laws and lack of enforcement, government policies are getting us killed and making us prisoners in a society of violence. A woman's life is in shambles because of it. She walked into a ladies' room in a nice hotel in Oklahoma City. As she exited the stall, the last thing she expected to see in the restroom was Juan Joaquin Wilson. The worst thing she could imagine was a rape. It gets worse. They caught Wilson a short time later, and the women identified him. Then it was discovered that this violent rapist had been previously arrested for felony possession of a firearm. But rather than hand him over for federal prosecution and a 5-year mandatory sentence in a federal prison, he was prosecuted at the state level. Wilson did get 5 years of probation, and a woman's life was ruined because of it. If government cared about that woman, or any woman for that matter, Wilson would have been sent to that federal penitentiary. Government failed. By the time I finish this speech, and just think about these numbers I'm going to give you because they're true. 2 Americans will be slain, 6 of our women will be forcibly raped, 27 of us will be robbed, and 50 more will be beaten. As you leave this hall, your life's in jeopardy. More than 25,000 violent crimes are committed every week in this country. In a typical week, one typical week, 300 Americans are murdered, 200 of us are going to be killed by 27,000 drunk drivers, 7,800 of us are going to be robbed, 15,000 of our neighbors are going to be violently assaulted, and 1,700 American women and girls are going to be raped. That's just 1 week in this country. And we call America the land of the free. But what is freedom if we're not free from fear and from peril? I'll ask the women in the audience today, how safe do you really feel walking home late at night? How safe do you feel walking over at that Arkansas River along that path after dark? You know what I'm talking about, or in a dark parking lot. That's the harsh reality. That's the very real danger individual American citizens face every single day in this country. The media, they don't report it. They don't report what the average citizen experiences. Charlie Sheen, Lindsay Lohan, they're more exciting for ratings. And the government elites won't admit it because it doesn't help them pass another law. But it's only going to get worse. 1 out of every 4 American cities, as we sit right here this afternoon, are cutting their public safety expenditures. As the economy continues to lag, harsher cuts are on the horizon. You all know that. When Camden, New Jersey laid off nearly half of its police force, cops stopped responding to many crime calls, and assaults with firearms in that city skyrocketed 289%. In Sacramento, California, homicides are up 43%, and the police vice unit has been completely eliminated. Oakland, California laid off 80 officers, and the department can't respond to burglary calls. Your home's burglarized, you're on your own. In Los Angeles County, prisoners now serve only half of their sentences. Texas is poised to slash its budget for prisons and parole officers. Cook County, Illinois officials say that budget cuts will drastically reduce criminal prosecutions. In Lawrence, Massachusetts, police units that focused on, listen to this, that focused on drugs, domestic violence, auto theft, and gangs have been completely eliminated. Detroit's lost 700 police officers, and Tulsa's lost 110. All of this, and what the media and the political elites want to do is ban magazines? I mean, are you kidding me? But that's their response to this blizzard of violent mayhem infesting our nation. One more gun law, on top of all the gun laws we already have on the books. One more law that's going to only disarm the law-abiding and make us less safe, and make the deranged and the violent more safe. If you want proof of that, let's go to Mexico. Actually, don't go there, because you're likely to be beaten, tortured, or murdered if you do. For honest Mexican citizens, guns are outlawed. You can't own one. So drug lords are free and safe to rule the land down there. Government officials are either on the take, or more and more of them are ending up in the morgue. And honest citizens are living imprisoned in their own homes, unarmed and terrified of what may be outside their door. And the terror is not coming here, it is here in our country. The Justice Department called Mexico's drug cartels the biggest organized crime threat to the United States of America. Over 1 million gang members are active in every single state in the U.S. And cartels are bringing drugs and murder and torture and mayhem to our neighborhoods. At our southern border, government has failed. Government can't protect us, but government can and has endangered us. And no matter how hard they try, the elitists and the media and the government are never going to convince us that disarming good people makes us, the average citizens, any safer. My point is this: government has failed, and more government is not the answer. That's just more failure. What we need is more freedom. Throughout history, one single truth rings loud and clear. The presence of a gun in the hands of a good person makes us all safer. It's true, and history proves it. In 1974, a bloody shooting occurred at a school. It was an awful tragedy. Sound familiar? Well, this particular school I'm talking about was in Israel. In the wake of that tragedy, Israel changed its policy. Teachers at schools and nurseries were armed. That's right. They put guns in the hands of good people. And since 1974, there's been only one school shooting in Israel, just one, in the last 37 years. That tragedy ended when the good guys with the gun stopped the bad guy with a gun. On the other hand, think about Fort Hood. Soldiers, American soldiers, were disarmed. They were banned from carrying firearms on their base, like all bases. Our soldiers were left completely defenseless in another government gun-free zone against a madman on a shooting spree, and 13 needlessly died that day. Government can't protect us, but it can and it has endangered us by restricting our freedom to protect ourselves. The tales of two women prove it. Please listen to these two brief but very disturbing videos.
The man is trying to break in their door. I don't know who he is. He said, "Let me in."
He's doing what?
He's trying to break in their door.
What is your address?
It's clear.
What's your name, ma'am?
Karen.
Karen? I want you to stay on the telephone. Okay?
Okay.
Where are you now?
I locked the front door and I'm upstairs in the bedroom.
Is there anyone with you?
No, just my baby.
Karen, are you still there?
He's in the house. He broke through the door.
He broke in. Karen, are you still there? Shut the bedroom door. Lock it if you can and come right back to the phone.
He's at the door.
What?
He's at the door. He's here. He's here.
Are you still with me? Tell him you've got the police on the phone.
I've got the police on the phone. Who are you? Why are you here?
He's in the bedroom with her.
I've got the police on the phone. I've got the police on the phone. Why are you here? Why are you here? Why?
Karen?
Lincoln County 911.
Yes, this is Donna Jackson. There's a man at my back door. He's trying to get in. He's hollering and yelling. I have a gun.
Okay. And you have a gun?
Yeah, yes, I do. I do not have it out.
Okay. Just I want you to stay.
Gun, and I will use it.
I want you to stay on the line with me.
I will. He is banging on the door.
Okay.
I need him now.
Okay, they're rushing. And you're there by yourself?
Yes. Yeah, my husband's at work. He's getting close to the door. I'm going to go ahead and get the gun out.
Can you understand what he's saying at all?
Well, he's crazy. He's crazy.
I can hear him yelling. Okay, County 13 is advising that you can defend your property if you need to.
I don't want to have to kill this man, but I'll kill him graveyard dead man.
I understand.
All right. Oh, crap, he's breaking in.
He's breaking in now.
He's breaking in now.
He's breaking
Got
in.
the gun on him. He's kicking the door. Please hurry.
Hurry, how far out
Please hurry. I'll have to kill him, ma'am. I don't want to kill him.
I understand, ma'am.
Oh, he's got it. He's
broke-
out of here, ma'am. I'm putting one down. Ma'am, hurry. Dear God, hurry.
Okay.
I haven't shot yet. Hurry.
Can you, is there, oh my God. Ma'am, is your phone a cordless phone?
I shot him going out front. I hit him.
I shot him.
God, help me.
What we just heard, whether we like it or not, is going to happen again. And at NRA, we think the second outcome is better. The Second Amendment to the Constitution has never been more relevant as it is today. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Founding Fathers in our country had it right from the beginning. Our security is in our own hands and is guaranteed by the bearing of arms in the hands of good people all across this country. The presence of a firearm in the hands of a good person makes us all safer. It's just that simple, and it's just that true. We see it every day, and even the government elitists know it to be true. We care about our president, so we surround him with armed protection. We care about our money, so we surround our banks and armored cars with armed guards. We care about our airports, office buildings, power plants, courthouses, even sports stadiums. So we surround them with armed security. Even celebrities and the wealthy are protected by armed security. So do we care less about our homes, our kids, our schools? Are they really less worthy of our protection? Government cannot provide full protection. Are we then as a society willing to live with a certain level of death and despair rather than empower an armed citizenry to protect us? It's time to acknowledge what we all know in our hearts to be true, that the best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Just knowing there's a good guy with a gun, a cop, a guard, a soldier, and yes, a law-abiding citizen with a firearm makes us feel safer because we are safer. An Arkansas Game and Fish officer proved it. Last May, 2 West Memphis, Arkansas police officers were brutally murdered during a traffic stop. The suspect's minivan was soon located and blocked by Crittenden County Sheriff Dick Busby. Sheriff Busby immediately came under heavy fire from the suspects. 2 men, violent and armed. Arkansas Game and Wildlife Officer Michael Neal rushed into the gunfight and rammed the suspect's vehicle. They opened fire on Neal. More than a dozen rounds pierced his windshield, dashboard, and grill. Neal returned fire from his rifle, emptying a full 30-round magazine. Neal then took up a firing position with other officers arriving on the scene. Officer Neal is a hero who proved my simple point. A good guy with a gun saved lives. That's why we need more freedom. That's why our Second Amendment rights should be expanded, not diminished. To those who would attempt to score political points on the heels of tragic violence, I say this: no more lies and laws and government failure. Think about this. At the scene of the crime, there's only 2 people there, the criminal and the victim. The police, although well-intentioned, almost always come in later. I have a right to protect myself, and so do you. And so does every single law-abiding citizen of this great country. I won't give up an inch of my freedom to exercise that right, not one single inch. We have a right to be safe, a God-given right to ensure our own security and that of our families and our friends. A government of integrity, compassion, and justice would respect and preserve that precious right. Americans deserve no less from their government and their public servants. Americans will fight to protect their rights and keep our nation strong and safe and free. We will do that because, by God, we must. Thanks so much. It's great to be with you this afternoon. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, we got some time for questions. Let us wait till you get the microphone to you and before you ask the question. We have a question right here, Bob. Yes, sir. Well, he'll take this one.
Thank you very much for being here today, and thank you for everything that you've done and the NRA's done.
Thank you.
As we know, there have been 2 cases decided by the United States Supreme Court recently, probably the 2 most important gun cases, maybe in the history of the Second Amendment. I know the NRA was heavily involved in both those cases. Could you take a moment and share with us what you see coming down the road for further legislation and court cases to further the Second Amendment rights that we have?
Well, I mean, let me say first, those cases, I believe that the court said what all Americans already knew, that it was their individual right. I mean, you look at history, I don't think there's any reading of a Second Amendment other than it could be an individual right. After the Civil War, the Second Amendment is the only right that actually has its own law in the Freedmen's Act. When states were trying to deny freed slaves their constitutional rights and right to travel and right to speech and right to everything else, Congress specifically passed the Freedmen's Act after the 14th Amendment that talked about one of the rights every freed slave had was a constitutional right to protect himself like every other American citizen. So, I mean, it's a crystal clear reading of American history what the Second Amendment was about. That being said, I believe that the Second Amendment hangs by one vote. And this 2012 election could break the back of it one way or the other. I mean, President Obama has already put 2 nominees on the court that I believe will spend the next 30 years trying to gut the Second Amendment. I mean, Justice Sotomayor, when she was asked in the hearings whether she believed it was an individual right, she said, it is settled law that it's an individual right. Now, most Americans went away thinking that's great, it's an individual right, and Justice Sotomayor believes that. What that really was inside the Beltway lawyer code for it's settled until I get it on the court, and then I'll vote any way I feel like it. And I think that's that's the type of back and forth in that town that makes Americans cynical about their government and about the hearing. I mean, the politicians just ought to be honest with people. If you don't believe it, don't believe it. So it's a huge election. I do believe that the American public, NRA's strength comes from the American public. I mean, we're decade in, decade out, the American public believes in the Second Amendment. That's where our clout comes from. And I believe the American public believes this is their freedom and wants it preserved. But this whole thing's up in the air on the Supreme Court. That being said, the Supreme Court is not the final authority on anything. The people are in this country, and the people are determined to protect the Second Amendment, and I believe the people will take advantage of whatever process is available to them to protect that freedom.
Yes, sir, right over here.
Thank you. I really got a lot out of what you said today, and the question I've got is, I'm of the same religious faith of the 2 teachers at Jonesboro, the one who was wounded and the one who was killed, stepping in front of their students to protect themselves. Time magazine had an article where they put Andrew Golden on the cover as a young kid dressed up in camouflage and a gun. I wrote them to complain, and I said, y'all put Shannon Wright, the teacher, on there, and they said, that's not, the other picture they had was more newsworthy. Can these people in the media elite relate to us on this issue?
I don't know what you do with the media. I mean, like I said, every FBI profiler tells them, do not show these pictures. And they just can't help themselves because of ratings. And it's just, I do know this on school shootings. There was a Secret Service study done recently on school shootings that showed a couple things. One, it showed in virtually every case, the shooter did everything they could except light themselves on fire and put up a neon sign that they were a problem. So we need to start looking for problems early on and notice the signs. But it also said that 75% of those, only 25% of those school shootings were stopped by law enforcement and police. The other 75% were stopped by someone in the system stopping it. Someone running their car and getting a firearm, a teacher stopping it, someone in the system somewhere. And that's a strong argument for arming good people somewhere in those schools to protect those kids. Because otherwise they're completely defenseless, and the Secret Service studies showed, despite all the good intentions, the police are not going to get there in time.
Got a question, mister, right up here. No, we got to get your mic. Got to have a mic.
How are you? I want to
Hi.
thank you for coming.
Thanks.
I mean, I appreciate you coming to the Clinton School.
I appreciate the invite.
I have a couple of questions, one of which is, I know the NRA is against restrictions, but there's got to be a certain point where restrictions come into play. Yep. So if you can sort of elaborate on restrictions where you think either personal use or military use style weaponry should come into play. I think 50 millimeter, for example. And then secondly, you've talked about government being a problem and issues with government overall. I'd like to think in terms of solutions of those problems, and I don't know if those are really addressed. So if you can sort of, I guess, outline how you would change government, because you've painted sort of a broad brush in terms of, I guess, government intervention or lack of intervention. Does that make sense what I'm asking? So I'm trying to get a feel or a sense of what you would alter or correct in sort of an ideal situation.
Here's what I'm trying to say. Government could do a lot more to make the average citizen safer. Those 20,000, 5,000 violent crimes a week, a lot could be done, and it's not being done. What I have been urging for the last 20 years in this country is this, and I really believe if we would do it, it would dramatically make this country safer, and it would reduce crime with guns in every single city. We have all kinds of gun laws on the books: drug dealers with guns, gangs with guns, felons with guns, illegal trafficking in guns, illegal transfer to juveniles, illegal smuggling. I mean, you name it, there is a gun law on the book right now to deal with it. And yet, here's the situation. The federal government doesn't want anything to do with prosecution of those laws. Syracuse University, their TRACS program, just yesterday, just came out with a study saying gun law prosecutions right now today are at the lowest point they've been in this country since 2001. And here's why. Despite all this talk about gun laws, the U.S. attorneys don't like to fool with those cases, and federal judges don't like them in the courts. I have said from the start, every U.S. attorney ought to do 10 additional gun prosecutions a month. That would take 12,000 of the worst people off the street. Or let's do 20 a month. That would take 24,000 off the street. We've only done that in one city, really, which was Richmond, Virginia, where a Truth and Justice U.S. prosecutor down there went into the police department, put the federal gun laws on a card, handed it to every officer, and said, I'm going to do something you've never seen done. Every time you officers run across one of these cases, call me. I'll prosecute 100% of the time. He cut murder with, and they called me and said, okay, I've been reading your speeches. I'm going to give you a chance to put your money where your mouth is. He said, because I'm going to do it. We put $500,000 into putting billboards all up over Richmond, Virginia, saying an illegal gun gets you 5 years in federal prison. We cut murder with guns by 70% the very first year we started doing that. Yet we don't do it in all of our other cities. Richmond that year had more prosecutions of the gun laws, federal gun laws, than the entire states of California, New York, and New Jersey combined. If I were running the country, I'd walk down to the Attorney General and I'd say, okay, here's the deal. Tomorrow, put out a directive to every U.S. attorney and tell them when they see gangs with guns, drug dealers with guns, felons with guns, start prosecuting. They're not doing it. I mean, and the media is so disinterested in it, they don't even want to have the discussion. And yet it's the only thing that would make people safe. Rank and file police all over the country know it would make people safe. And I got into it with Bill Clinton on that issue, President Clinton. He kept saying, oh, Wayne, what Wayne wants is Wayne wants to wait for the airplane to blow up, and then he wants to try to track down the person that planted the bomb. And that's what Wayne wants. Well, that wasn't what Wayne wanted. What Wayne wanted and what they did in Richmond is police stumble across these drug dealers with guns, these gangs with guns. And if you prosecute them when they come to your attention, you prevent them from getting to their next crime scene and committing crime. And we're not doing that in Philadelphia, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in Washington, D.C., and every big city of this country. We need to change the culture of prosecution in this country, and we need to start making people safe. And it would do it.
All right,
and President Bush didn't do it either. I begged him to do it, and then 9/11 happened, and what you had was all the focus was lost.
Fernando at the back, right there.
Hi, how's it going? My name is Fernando Coots. I'm a student here at the Clinton School, and on behalf of all of us, just really wanted to thank you for coming out here today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Well, you made a very compelling argument for putting guns in the hands of good people, and I really respect that argument. My question, though, is about the NRA's support for the assault weapons, the ban that existed, doesn't exist, and has been going back and forth. How do you, I guess, what would your argument be in that situation for like machine guns and other types of weapons in that situation? Thank you.
You know, I've got a clip here, but I don't know whether I show it or not because it will take up time. But here's the deal. None of those guns under that ban that you're talking about were machine guns, not a one. It's already illegal. You can't. I mean, you can't do any gun that is readily transferable, already manufactured into a machine gun. The guns that were on that semi-automatic list, that so-called assault weapons list that the media keeps talking about, shoot no different than any other gun. They don't make bigger holes. They don't spray bullets. They're not more powerful. They don't shoot faster. There is zero difference in the functional performance characteristics of any gun on that list that they banned and any gun that they didn't ban. What happened is the media and some politicians convinced the American public that they were more powerful, shot faster, made bigger holes, sprayed bullets, or were machine guns. So all the public that doesn't know anything about guns thinks you're talking about machine guns. I even got into it with Pete from NBC, Williams from NBC. He said, Wayne, I want to do an interview with you. I said, look, I'm not going to do it till you go to the range with me, because I'm sick of you guys showing this on the air wrong. I went to the range. I spent all afternoon with him. I turned on the Today Show that morning, and they're firing a fully automatic machine gun right at the viewer and saying, NRA is trying to put these guns back on the streets of our country. And I called him up and said, Pete, how could it happen? I'm sorry. They just wanted they went to the file and pulled the most sensational piece of footage they can find, and that's what they put on the air. And honest, I mean, the reason it expired is Congress found out the truth. It was lied into law, and lies that are found out don't get renewed. And that's why Congress let that so-called ban expire. It didn't ban one gun that wasn't any different than any other gun, and all it did was ban a few cosmetic accessories that had nothing to do with how a gun shoots. What the media needs to do is just tell the truth and let the American public make up their mind, rather than this agenda journalism you get, which NRA ends up on. I mean, whether it's cop killer bullets, which everything the media printed was not accurate in terms of what happened on that issue, to plastic guns, to this issue. I mean, I just shake my head over the American media these days. It's all agenda journalism, and the truth gets lost in the process.
Here's your question. Wait just a second. Wait for the microphone. Yeah.
Do you believe that there should be any kind of restriction on any kind of weapon, or do you think there should be no restrictions on any weapons?
I mean, there are all kinds of restrictions on the bad guys, and that's the key. I mean, as long as we keep focusing on the inanimate object and on the device, I really believe we're never going to get to the point, because the issue is about dangerous people. It's not about devices. And if you keep focusing on the device, which is all the media wants to do, and they never want to talk about dangerous people, prosecutions of the laws on the books, and what could actually make progress. They just want, the minute something happens, you get this predictable response of one more gun law. And then when they get it on the books, they don't even enforce it. I mean, we help put the instant check on the books. If you walk into a gun store and try to buy a gun, you go through an instant check system. Do you know what the federal government now lets happen if they find out you're a prohibited person in there trying to buy a gun? They tell you, well, we're not going to sell you the gun, but have a nice day. And they let you walk out the store. And we know what happens. If it's a criminal, they're going to go about their business and get a gun on the black market. They're going to steal one. They're going to commit their crime. The complete breakdown of all of this in terms of making people safe, in my opinion, and I've been watching it for 30 years now, is that we argue and argue and argue, and yet the whole system is broken down on prosecutions. And you need to change the whole culture at the national level. I mean,
Josh, got a question right here.
Hi, Mr. LaPierre.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. I've got a great deal of respect for you. You're a guy with a backbone, and you've just got to love that. I've got sort of a two-tiered question for you. Where over the next 20 or 30 years do you see concealed carry legislation going? I think 20 or 30 years ago, we might not have thought it would be where it is today. And second, do you think we'll see an increase in possibly open carry legislation? When I think about deterrence, I think, gosh, if I'm going to stick up a convenience store, I'm probably not going to do it if somebody else in there's got a gun. So I'd love to hear your take on that. Also, could I get a picture with you afterwards?
Sure.
That means he wants to run for office.
Probably, yeah. I honestly believe the trend toward empowering law-abiding people in this country has been building for decades. And I think it's because the average citizen sees the hypocrisy of the media, and they see what the elites do. The elites sleep soundly protected by a gun. I mean, you had the whole Rosie O'Donnell thing. She thought her bodyguards were okay with guns, but the heck with the average person. And I think the average citizen sees through that. I sat there in Florida years ago with every major police organization in the state of Florida when we endorsed one of the first concealed carry bills, right to carry bills in this country. We only had 6 states then. We are now up to 40 states that have shall issue right to carry laws for law-abiding citizens. They work. We've got the learning of 20 years on it. Law-abiding people are not a problem. They protect themselves if they need to. And it's a huge success story. You've seen that same trend toward empowering law-abiding people with pilots on aircraft. You've seen it with issues like Castle Doctrine, where law-abiding people can do what they need to in their home to save their life if a criminal breaks in. But this whole momentum has really been building for decades in terms of law-abiding people being able to protect themselves. We're one of the largest police organizations in terms of membership in the country. We have 80,000 rank-and-file police officers are members of the NRA. We have 11,000 police instructors that train police departments in shooting every year. And yet the rank-and-file guys know that they can't be there at the scene of the crime, that the average citizen, as I said, is there alone. And that's why they support the right of people to own firearms and protect themselves, like that dispatcher told that person. So what was the second part of your question?
Do you think we'll see an increase in open carry legislation?
I do think this. I think we have a terrible problem on our Mexican border. And I'm not talking about an illegal coming across and seeking a better life in the United States. They're as much of a victim on this as anybody else. But I was just out with the SWAT teams early last week in Arizona, 10 of them, full machine guns, full military gear, vests, everything else. And we got an hour outside of Houston, and we get out in the desert, and the SWAT teams go, they're watching us right now. And I'm like, what do you mean they're watching us? And they go, the cartels are on every piece of high ground between here and the Mexican border. They've got the most sophisticated electronic gear, they've got the most sophisticated night vision, and they are moving their resources right now around law enforcement. I mean, it's hard to believe that's going on in our country. Those ranchers and all those people in their houses are completely scared to death. They are armed to the teeth. That's all they have to protect themselves. And our government in Washington has turned its back on their problem in a way that I never thought possible. I asked them, how much are you guys catching? They said, we think we're catching 5 to 10% of the shipments of drugs, heroin, cocaine, and marijuana that these cartels are shipping up. And it's going into Phoenix in that sector. And the point is, in that one sector alone, 1 out of 6 people coming across that sector already has a criminal record in the United States. That's 40,000 in that one sector alone. And there are 8 other sectors on the border. And that's why you end up with these 230 U.S. cities with 20,000 gangs and 1 million gang members. If we don't get serious about this crime problem, I believe we're going to have an epidemic like we've never seen in the country. And people are going to come back to let law-abiding people protect themselves, whether it's open carry, whether it's concealed carry, but let them protect themselves because they want to be safe.
Wayne, 2 quick questions.
All right.
And then we're going to go. First one I want to ask is, were you surprised by the veto of Governor Brewer's veto in Arizona of carrying guns on college campuses? And then the second thing, what about the gun shows and the checks and the instant checking at the gun shows? Could you comment on both those?
Well, here's what the federal law is on. I'm never surprised by what someone does I honestly believe that, like I said before, you look at the Secret Service studies, if someone has a right to carry permit, I don't think crossing an arbitrary boundary onto a college campus ought to disqualify the person. The only one with a right to carry right now on a college campus is a madman and someone that wants to do terrible harm. And if someone has a permit, I think that permit, just because you cross an arbitrary boundary, it shouldn't disqualify it. The law on who has to have a license and not is this, and Congress did extensive hearings on this. If you do it for livelihood and profit, you have to have a dealer's license. If you're a hobbyist or you're a collector or you're a hunter selling a gun to another hunter, you don't have to have a license. And I think that's the way it should be. Checks at gun shows right now are done by dealers. And I know the media keeps focusing on that, I believe you could shut down every gun show in this country tomorrow, and it would make no difference on crime at all. There's no evidence that criminals are getting their guns from gun shows. The most likely place to run into an ATF agent is a gun show. There is no gun show loophole. All these bad guys are prohibited from owning guns to begin with. And they're talking about making what's illegal really, really, really illegal. And I just don't see where it will do any good at all. I mean, it's another something that masks as a public safety solution when I don't think it delivers any public safety. And I mean, if police officers see someone with an out-of-state plate go into a gun show and come out, run the plate. If the guy turns out to be a criminal, arrest him. But I think it's one more argument that's totally off the point, particularly when the fact that we're not even prosecuting the criminals that they catch in those gun shows or in dealers' shops trying to buy guns that they catch. We're letting them walk out the door. I mean, that's like Bonnie and Clyde. Clyde walks in, tries to buy the gun, comes home to Bonnie and said, got good news and bad news. Didn't sell me the gun, but here I am. They let me walk out. And it just doesn't, and so, I mean, I come back to, if you want to make this country safe, we've got to change the culture of prosecution and make a serious statement that if you're a drug dealer and you touch a gun, a gang member, a felon, we're going to prosecute you and you're going to prison.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank Wayne LaPierre, the CEO of the National Rifle Association.